Colleagues, good afternoon once again. We continue our working day. I invite spokesperson of ATO, Colonel Andriy Lysenko, with her last updates about the situation in ATO area. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. The enemy continues to accumulate forces on the main directions of engagement in the near airport of Donetsk. Militants are trying to push out Ukrainian units from Avdiivka, Marinka, and from Piske. Towards Mariupol, they would like to take control of Shirokina and Chermalik. That's what militants are trying to do. The most difficult the situation is around Debaltseve. In that sector of defense, militants stormed ATO forces many times near Luhansk, Kamenka, Chernukhina, and Debaltseve itself. Attacks were accompanied by artillery shell and mortars. They used also ground systems and small arms, but all the attacks of militants were fought off, and they had losses. They lost vehicles, ammunition, and their forces. Near Obozne, our militants, our armed forces destroyed a tank, and near Stanitsa Luhanska, 2 KAMAZ vehicles with militants. During the last day, because of engagements, we lost 11 Ukrainian soldiers. 40 were wounded. The enemy continues active air intelligence using drones. In general, during the last days, we noticed a record number of drones, 22. And border guards in Stanitsa Luhanska, Krasnotarivka, and Milova, they noticed 10 drones that abused the airspace of Ukraine and crossed illegally our border. 6 more drones were noticed not far from Kramatorsk, Artemivsk, and Milova. Yesterday at noon, our armed forces shot down one drone Orlan 10. It was collecting data and corrected artillery and ground systems that shot upon ATO and upon civilians in Kramatorsk and in areas around it. This is the 6th drone that was shot down by our soldiers. Militants spread their activity to Russia, spread their activities in Russia. Bandits, drunk, awfully drunk, from Luhansk on a truck, they crossed to Russia, and they destroyed the fence on the border crossing point Izvarino and Donetsk, and they left from Ukraine. At the requirement of Russian border guards, they did not arrest, and that's why they had to use units of OMON and FSB of Russian Federation, who used small arms against them. So Russian terrorism is turning against its creators. As a result of criminal activities of the enemy, our civilians die. Yesterday in Popasna, unknown woman died, and 5 local residents were wounded because of the shelling of militants. There are also people who were killed in Stanitsa Luhansk and Valusk and Dzerzhinsk. Not near Novotashkivsk, we found a body of a local person with wounds. He got on a mine. Militants shelled upon Shastia 3 times. They used grad system, and they continue to shell not only upon positions of ATO but also on the town and on the local thermal power station, power plant. They damaged a gas line in Lobacheva, Novodarsky district, Luhansk region, and 100 people don't get gas now. In Donetsk region, because of militants, 81 town doesn't have electricity. Don't have electricity. In Kramatorsk, because of the shelling by militants, and they used the Smerch system, and they damaged 12 multi-storied buildings, and the damages because of that, and because of considering compensations to that and those wounded is about 3.5 million. The sea mission in Ukraine continues the investigation of that crime, and they found out that the shelling was for the shelling they used cassette bombs. The mission says that every missile had cassette modules. After the study of modules, international monitors came to a conclusion that such elements are common to ammunition that is used against armored vehicles and against living forces. We continue to evacuate our people from towns that are near the border. Officers risking their life, they evacuate people from Krasnodorivka and Mariivka that are under chaotic artillery shelling by militants. Among evacuated people, there are a lot of old ones, and Ukrainian officers also deliver food, kids' food, medicine, and hygiene items collected by volunteers. According to operational data, militants shell upon special cars, white collar. They shell upon ambulance. Yesterday, from the Debaltsevo, they organized. They did not evacuate people yesterday, and but volunteers, with the help of volunteers on their own, 519 people left. 28 are children, and there were some disabled people. The families received the necessary assistance and also housing. From Popasna, we were able to evacuate 36 civilians, and 5 of them are children. Yesterday, Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine gave 5 million hryvnia to help families and victims of terrorist attack in Kramatorsk. Local authorities have to develop the plan how they are going to help. Ukrainian Special Services destroy infiltrators.
The Security Service of Ukraine detained the citizen of Kharkov, the member of the band of DNR, nicknamed Nimitz. The militant himself surrendered to our law enforcement officers and also talked about the crimes of his curators. He was part of the illegal armed group that was subordinate to terrorist Girkin. Here's the video with the repentance of the detained person. In reality, those who are talking about Russian peace, they disseminate death and violence in Donbass. That is why I stopped any contacts with this criminal organization. Our people also detained 2 criminals of the band DNR that were enrolling the mercenaries into the illegal armed group. One of the detained persons, nicknamed Dimon, was collecting information about the firing positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, participated in provocations and the acts of subversive activities. The leader of this group, part of which was Dimon, was detained by the Security Service of Ukraine Ukraine earlier. Also in Zaporizhia, the security service detained one more terrorist who had to disseminate the symbols of the so-called Novorossiya in the city and enroll accomplices via social networks. In January, he received a new task to violate mobilization in the region and also to disseminate the disinformation and lies. In Lugansk region, our law enforcement officers detained the member of the band Prizrak. And the combatant left the illegal criminal group after his commander left his henchmen during bombing of the city of Yampol. That means that the leaders of the bands, they are fighting exclusively in order to enrich themselves, and they are ready to leave their henchmen any moment. Besides, yesterday night, the counterintelligence detained a member of the subversive group in Kharkiv, which participated in preparation and explosive in the and explosions in Cafe Stina, and also he was putting the explosive near the Malyshev plant. The criminal was supplying weapons and explosives for committing acts of terrorism, was collecting information on the objects of infrastructure, and was also hiding other members of groups of terrorists. Ukrainian military who defend the Baltsava have become the example of courage and heroism, just like the defenders of Donetsk airport. One of them, the commander of one of Ukrainian units, with the call signal Kremin, which means stone. He was born in Ivano-Frankivsk and got his nickname for his very strong character. His subordinates trust their lives to him, and they know that he will do everything to execute the task without losses. Neither him nor his unit leave their positions. Yesterday, in the result of the meeting in Norman format in Minsk, with the participation of leaders of Germany, France, Ukraine, and Russia, the agreement was reached as to see stopping fire in the east of Ukraine and as to process of peaceful settlement. The document was approved as part of the trilateral contact group. According to that, from the 15th of February, the ceasefire regime will be established during the next 2 weeks. The heavy weaponry is to be withdrawn from this line of firing. The document also provides for liberating the hostages, conducting local elections according to Ukrainian legislation, and restoring of the control of Ukraine over the borders. This document leaves in force the preliminary Minsk agreements, and it's based on the position of territorial integrity of Ukraine. International community welcomes the signing of Minsk agreement and supports Ukraine. The President of European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, confirmed during the meeting with the President Poroshenko in Brussels the readiness of the EU to provide humanitarian assistance to those who suffer in Donbass. The Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, supported the achieved in Minsk agreements as to ceasefire in Donbass, but he's concerned with the fact whether they will be implemented. He also emphasized that if the ceasefire is not observed, Canada will consider all the options of assistance to Ukraine, including supply of weapons. The U.S. do not exclude the opportunity to apply sanctions against Russia and making decision as to providing weapons to Ukraine if in the nearest future it will be clear that Russian Federation and the combatants supported by Russian Federation do not observe Minsk agreements in full volume. That was mentioned by the Speaker of the State Department of the U.S., Jen Psaki. In the result of the summit in Brussels on Thursday, the Prime Minister of Poland, Ewa Kopacz, stated that the sanctions which were agreed on at the latest meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the European Union will become effective from Monday. Also, European Commission will be getting ready to next sanctions if Minsk agreements are violated by Russian side. The Chancellor of Germany, Merkel, the President of France, Hollande, made similar statements. Hollande stated that while Russia is not observing all conditions there's no chance that the Mistrals will be transferred to Russia. The acting head of OSCE, Ivica Dacic, stated that the OSCE in Europe will put all the efforts to help observe Minsk agreements by the sides of the armed conflict in Donbass.
Do you anything about the shell in upon Luhansk at night? Last night we had 111 shelling, including different towns and cities. They shelled upon 48 towns and cities during last night, including Lugansk. We have information that in Donetsk region, Lohvinovo, there is a battle between the Luhansk separatists and Donbass battalion. Who controls that city? There is a battle there. The city is not under control by any party because it is right on the line of the battle. The highway which takes from here to here, from Artemsk to Debaltseve. That is not the only highway. It's not the only road to our Debaltseve units. And that's why our soldiers who fight for Debaltseve, they receive ammunition and everything necessary to do the duty. As to that town, Lohvinovo, there is a difficult engagement there. There are a battle, and militants pulled up a lot of reserves, and we do the same. And our units move around. There is not only Donbass battalion. There are some other units, and they use artillery there. So now the situation is not that clear there. So it's impossible to speak about advantage of one side or the other. Do you expect that there will be more engagements before a ceasefire, and do you do anything to reduce losses? In any case, before ceasefire, we will hold our positions, and we will fight back to attacks of militants. Lohvinovo, and we have information that militants captured 17 of our soldiers. Is it true or not? We don't have that information yet. We cut 12 militants. That's what I know, but I don't know about our men in captivity.
I would like to understand what should happen in Debaltseve according to what has been signed in Minsk. Who should retreat from this area?
You see, this is not a new agreement. This is just a set of activities, like step by step. It's a list of steps, what should be done to comply with the agreements, Minsk agreements from last year. It's not a new document. It's not a new agreement. It is more detailed plan how to put into life that peace plan of our president. According to that agreement, Debaltseve must stay part of Ukraine under our control, and units of militants should pull back on the line that was fixed on September 11, since September 19, in the memorandum which was signed in Minsk. And after the ceasefire begins, we needed to pull back 50 kilometers, both sides. They have to pull heavy artillery, so Debaltseve should stay under our control. So they will have to pull all heavy artillery, which is with a caliber more than 100 millimeters.
Sorry, in English. My question's kind of the same, but it's still not clear to me. According to this agreement, will Ukraine withdraw its heavy artillery from Debaltseve? Well, Debaltseve remains part of Ukraine. Does the agreement mean you have to withdraw your weapons from there? And also from Mariupol, it would also fall within the 50-kilometer buffer zone. And are you prepared to withdraw artillery from those places?
Thank you for questions.
Minsk agreements foresee that we will pull back heavy weapons and artillery with caliber that is more than 100 millimeters, and independently on the name of the city. We pull back from the separation line or demarcation line along the whole line of the conflict. So name of the city doesn't matter. So the second day of ceasefire, if there is a real ceasefire, then there will be an international group OSCE and three parties contact group, which includes officers from Ukrainian armed forces, officers from Russian armed forces, and representatives OSCE. So under their control, we pull simultaneously heavy weapons for us to prevent any provocation, and there must be a monitoring. It will be done in three ways. So visual monitoring, done by people physically who will be on the separation line. Then drones will be used. And satellite monitoring, for us to understand a broader picture of what is happening on this territory. So that's why, once again, I would like to underline. So name of the city or town doesn't matter. Ukraine is ready, 100% comply with all the requirements of Minsk agreements. We were ready even last year in September. Now we will be able also to comply with this new enlarged plan, signed in Minsk. What is happening in Mariupol now? Because we have information that everything is quiet there. As I understand, by number of shelling, they shell more upon Mariupol. So we observe escalation. And also a question about Debaltseve. We have information that members of the coordination center and ceasefire, they're supposed to come to Debaltseve. Could you comment on that? As to the south, I mean Mariupol, militants continue shelling, but we can say, if we to compare to the rest of the parts, the shelling is like we had before during the previous days, but the geography is broader. If we had, if they covered 33 towns last night, during this day, they shelled upon 48 towns and cities. So They shall not just on Ukrainian armed forces, they just ruin the infrastructure. They want to damage everything. And they kill our civilians. Militants do that. What about Debaltseve? In Debaltseve, we have heavy engagements there. So the monitoring group, it cannot be there. For simple reason. It's impossible to be there. It's impossible to monitor anything now. As soon as there is a ceasefire, then the representatives of that group can move to that place, and then they can monitor who violates ceasefire, who provokes, and also they can write their reports. And I have to tell you that European and international community is looking very attentively how Russian militants, how they comply with these agreements that were approved yesterday together with the heads of states and the representatives of so-called LNR and DNR. Shelling, more shelling, broader geography. Is it a surprise for the command, especially after the signing Minsk agreements? Could you compare this night with previous nights? Is it unique? Is shelling more intensive? Is geography broader? You see, they shell more, and we don't understand why they are shelling upon towns with civilians where we don't have our armed forces. Before 24 February 15, we still have 1 day and a half. Before February 24 February 15, so we'll do everything possible to stop militants, to stop their shelling, and our answer is very precise. Our artillery is very precise. That's what I mean. But to influence on their mind, those who send them and arm them, they can influence them. And those who give them orders on attacks and offenses. So it's not their will. And that's clear because we have lots of operational information that local separatists, they refuse to go and attack Ukrainian armed forces because they have heavy losses. Thank you very much. Next briefing on ATO situation will be tomorrow at 12:30, and the next briefing will be in 2 minutes.